that was requested in the interim constitution. So, what could happen is a framework constitution that deals with the basic principles and constitutional institutions and key issues such as relating to affirmative action or of state restructuring could be given over to commissions to report to the oncoming parliament. There are various ways that people are certainly thinking about all of this. So it is possible, maybe more than a detailed constitution, a framework constitution might be feasible. But question remains, will it be able to carry the weight of the hopes and desires of the very, very politicized population? These are questions that I cannot answer. What it seems to me, if the option 1 or option B, which is framework constitution, seems an unlikelihood, then the only way out is to go for extension of the constitution, of the Constituent Assembly by 6 months to a year. There are dangers to this. Again, if it is seen that the Constituent Assembly slept for 23 months and suddenly decided just for convenience to extend it, there are too many dislocations and too much anger extent among the communities of Nepal that there might just possibly be some kind of anarchy and conflagration, that this government, as it is extremely weak, and I will not have time to talk about the weakness of this government and why for, but I would just mention that much. Who knows, and the state itself has become very, very weak to the extent that you can't even call a shoot-at-sight curfew and think that you can get away with controlling a situation. This is how weak the state has become. So in that context, the danger of extending the deadline without having done some homework to indicate that we are serious. And this is why perhaps the next 3 months should be utilized by the political parties, including the Maoists, in getting serious and indicating that they are serious. What is it that they could do? Most important thing is to handle the cantonments. And as I suggested to you earlier, indeed that is an area where there is movement and the groundwork has been done. It is just a critical element of choosing the numbers and telling the Maoist cadre this is what the Maoist party has agreed to. There is something known as the High-Level Political Commission, in which Mr. Girija Prasad Koirala, Mr. Jalnath Khanal of the UML, and Mr. Pushpa Kamal Dahal of the Maoist party, all of them one president, 2 chairs, they are there, and unfortunately it got into a bad start because it immediately was seen as an attempt, extra-constitutional, outside of the Constituent Assembly rather, outside of the Constituent Assembly method to change the government in favor of the Maoists. That is how it got seen, whatever might have been the initial intentions. However, whereas this HLPM, the high-level political mechanism, could be very effective in promoting the peace process and in making sure that the key issues of the constitution writing blockages were resolved, because these are the most high level. It would have been good if even this mechanism had come under the imprimatur of the Constituent Assembly. Instead, it was done away from the Constituent Assembly, thereby weakening the Constituent Assembly and raising questions about the longevity of this weak government. Nevertheless, it seems that perhaps this HLPM, with Mr. Koirala also in it and being the coordinator, can work in that direction. If that happened, we might therefore in the constitution get either of the 3 options. I'll quickly go into human rights. On the human rights score, my colleague Sushil Thakur, had he been here, would have been more effective, but I would just share with you certain ideas about human rights issues in Nepal right now. Has to do with impunity, handgun, the spread of handguns, the kidnapping of young children, the extortion rackets that are going all over the place, not necessarily from the part of the state, but because of an overall weakening of the state, that has been the function of the last decade. There continues to be impunity all over. Press does get affected, not from the side of the state, but the overall atmosphere of impunity means that there is a lot of self-censorship. There is also, especially in the Mid-Eastern Terai, Mid-Eastern Terai, there are issues of encounter killings that have not received the kind of focus that they need in Kathmandu's human rights or media community and human rights community. Beyond that, there is the issue of transitional justice, because Nepal did come through a brutal phase, and there are those who say we should let things be the way they are, let there just be not reconciliation, but let's just there be mel milap. And there are others who say that at least the volume of pain among the victims of the conflict of both sides is very deep. And one of the tragedies of Nepal of the last 3 years, since the People's Movement, has been that the whole idea of rehabilitation and reconstruction has got almost no focus. As a result, not only is the overall economy remaining in its stagnated state, but much more importantly, on a human scale, people have not really even begun to measure the volume of physical, mental pain and torture among the victims and the victims' families. This is a major issue, and so even for the sake of the victims and the families, besides the agragaman, the forward movement of our society into a peaceful way, it seems that some of the principles of transitional justice have to be applied, which means having an important term, I grant you, Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Problem is it got mistranslated in Nepali. It is translated as Satya Nirupar Tatha Mel Milap Ayog. So as you notice, reconciliation has been watered down to friendship. And a lot of the politicians tend to now think that what this means is that the world is telling the Nepali polity that you just have to hug each other and do mel milap and let bygones be bygones. Whereas the justice element and the forgiveness element in the term reconciliation is blowing in the wind. It is just not addressed at all. Recently, you've begun to see an interesting facet, which I will share with you, between the Maoists and the National Army, both of whom have closets rather full of skeletons, and both of whom have serving officers known to have been involved in excesses, deep excesses. In that, there is a case of Maina Sunwar, a girl from a Dalit background, who was murdered in an army encampment. The army first denied any wrongdoing, later accepted it, and went through its own so-called internal process. I should share with you that through the thousands of cases of excesses and extrajudicial killings during the war years, besides the conflict, the extrajudicial killings per se, hundreds and hundreds of them, I think they go into the thousands, not one case has been tried in a civilian court. The case that has come closest to be tried in a civilian court is the Maina Sunwar case. But what has happened is Niranjan Basnet of the Nepal Army, an officer of the Nepal Army, who happened to be serving in an international assignment, was sent back by the United Nations. But prior to that, the Supreme Court of Nepal had directed that aforementioned Niranjan Basnet be delivered to the Kagri District Court for the case that had been lodged on the killing of Maina Sunwar. What is happening as we speak is the Nepal Army has been directly challenging the writ of the Supreme Court by having this officer taken into its own charge and giving all kinds of arguments, which seems to really, very interestingly, be a direct challenge to the Supreme Court. But such is the weakness of our overall media, our civil society, our polity, as well as such is the state of extreme distress among all sectors that nobody has focused on this. There are so many issues extant that this most important issue of the National Army actually denying a directive from the Supreme Court is not being followed. This is the state, and interestingly, you will find that the Maoists themselves are not extra keen to follow issues that the human rights community would like to follow on excesses by the Nepal Army. Because the Maoists seem to know that, their understanding seems to be that the moment they push issues, cases that this human rights community brings forward against the army, and mostly they happen to be cases in which excesses were committed against Maoist members, they know that on the rebound, issues will come back to the Maoists. So lately we've begun to hear an interesting similarity in the voices, identical almost, voices coming out of the Maoists and the Nepal army. And there seems to be a winking going on between the two sides. What that does to the overall long-term peace process and Nepal's journey towards a violent, free society, a peaceful society in the real sense, a dynamic peace, one has to see. Lastly, the Maoist rhetoric. The Maoist rhetoric has, especially from the mouth of the all-important personage, that is Chairman Pushpa Kamal Dahal, has been going, ratcheting up. Every week it goes to a higher level. And there seems to be something that is rather uncoordinated and drastic about the kind of voices we're hearing. And again, the media is now become almost blasé, that it doesn't mention and report the kind of, or analyze the kind of excess statements, such as Pushpa Kamal Dahal, the chairman, saying, we don't mind if to swim in the blood of 1 million citizens to get what we want. 16,000 deaths is nothing. That is just one egregious example of things that come up again and again. It seems that there is a desperation in the Maoists to get back to government, and the inability to get back to the government means that they are under pressure from their cadre. And as a result, there is a lot of, as I said, uncontrolled, if not behavior, certainly uncontrolled rhetoric coming out of there. The origins, of course, go back to the adventurism that led to trying to go outside the constitutional norms in trying to change the army's role of command. In doing that, why did Pushpa Kamal Dahal, as Prime Minister till May the 4th, 2009, why did he do that? It seems that the answer lies in something like the Shakti Corps video. The way the cadre had been groomed to believe that there would be full integration, when clearly that was not the case. And I'm not going into details of that particular tip, but that gives you a sense of how, because it is not contextual, because it was forming opinions among the cadre base. That is why it is not contextual, because in the end that came to haunt Pushpa Kamal Dahal as Prime Minister when he had to try to go for full integration. When he found that was not possible, he tried to go for an extra constitutional act, and the President's action then to block that action, which is what led to all of this. What I would like to refer to is the fact that the Maoists actually had all the laddus, if you will, in their hands. They had almost all the important ministries, from finance to defense, and they had a very malleable person from the UML as the Home Ministry. So essentially, they had full command of the government. Yet, and they had all the birds in the bush in their hand actually, and they let go of it. They seem to have realized afterward that that was a major mistake. And I agree. I do agree that the Maoists, and perhaps Maoists in government longer, would have worked to the advantage of overall democracy in one way, because of the maturity that comes from having to actually rule. Others would say that Maoists are actually moving towards full control of state through control of government, and that is the way it would have gone. Nevertheless, from the Maoist perspective, I have no doubt that this was a mistake done, and now there is a need to get back. So the Maoists utilized street action, parliament closure of 5 months. They went on a campaign evolving from Girija Prasad Koirala and Nepali Congress, the enemy number one, because the Maoists are still in a situation where their institutional structure seems to require some kind of enmity. Less so now than before, but nevertheless, there has to be one person that you do target. So President Ram Baran Yadav evolved as that after his action, and one might even say naturally so for his action that the Maoists saw as completely against their interests. So they went again on this campaign of so-called civilian supremacy, essentially saying that the president had gone against the principles of civilian supremacy. In all of this, nothing worked. Nothing worked. No street action, parliament closure, etc. In the meantime, Mr. Madhav Kumar Nepal, with an otherwise very weak government, both due to the ministers, junior ministers that were sent to his ministry, also because of his inability to steer to control the anarchy within the government. Some of that must be laid to rest at his feet. This is a government in anarchy, and there is no guiding force. There are ministers that are going ricocheting all over the place all the time. The one credit that we can give to the present Prime Minister, I think without too much controversy coming up, would be that the peace process, which would mean work of the special committee, he has managed to push forward as very single-mindedly. And that, if that leads to the constitution writing, then certainly that will be to his credit. In any case, the Maoists have found that this very weak Prime Minister just cannot be dislodged. They've tried a lot of things. And it is a government of 22 parties. And yet, it has not been possible to take away any one of these individuals. The answer seems to lie in the fear that other parties have developed of the Maoists, and the rhetoric that continues, that makes these interesting and incongruous coalition of 22 parties not break apart, not even one to break apart. And the Maoists have also tried to go in and to play with the others. And I think this is, you might say this is well within the principles of party politics. They have gone to the UML, made promises. They've gone to Mr. Girija Prasad Koirala, and credible word has it, reportage has it, that 2 weeks ago, Mr. Pushpa Kamal Dahal went to Girija Prasad Koirala and said, "We know you're unwell, but why don't you?" I say this because I think it is reasonably sure that this did happen, and it was not reporters' imagination. And you can even rule from your sick bed, but why don't you rule for now, and after the constitution is written, we can come into power. Which seems to be an indication that the Maoists see the importance of being in government after the constitution is written, to be able to be the government in power when the elections are held. So it seems that the Maoists do have a strategy, especially with relation not even to why to get into the government now, not because of the constitution writing, but to be the government after the elections. And I think that is fair enough as a strategy. The party certainly would look for its own interest. So what the Maoists have done, therefore, is when they see that they just cannot get into government, they seem to have become desperate within themselves. One does not know the level of polarization within the parties, but it seems to have suddenly happened to the extent that it cannot be hidden anymore. It is in this context, very tense context, that Mr. Pushpa Kamal Dahal has been saying things that a statesman or a would-be statesman would not get involved in. He used the very feudal, if you will, term of Nokar and Malik to refer to all the other political parties as Nokar and India as the Malik. At other times he used the term India as the Prabhu. And that really Nepal's polity functions only according to dictates from New Delhi. This is the understanding that is behind the suggestion made to a mass meeting in Kathmandu in full glare of television cameras. He said, "We now realize where the real power in Nepal is. And now, therefore, we are not going to negotiate with the Nepali players, the other political parties. We're going to negotiate with the power that matters. That is New Delhi, the Malik." Forget for a while the terminology used, which seems to, as one Nepali commentator said, what does this do to the lakhs and lakhs of Nokars around Nepal? What is the message that the head of a communist party is trying to give to these workers? What sense of humiliation might there have been throughout the country at that point, because all the televisions were going live at that point. But we won't even go into niceties such as that. My own belief is that, yes, India has interests in Nepal. We also know that India keeps very close watch in Nepal. But what happened in terms of this government getting to power and this government coming out of power is something that is and should be completely within the control of the Nepali polity. Because it is a question of Samsadiya Samskar, parliamentary process. This government, with Madhav Kumar Nepal, who was actually nominated to the Constituent Assembly by the Maoists. He did lose in 2 places, by the way. But the Maoists already cancelled that one out by nominating him to be the chairman of the Constitutional Committee. This is a government that has been formed after the Maoists resigned by 22 parties who formed a majority. They got 301 plus. And the idea of opposition began during the time of the Maoists in government. And they also got into government through parliamentary process. They left the parliamentary, they resigned, and a new government came in through the parliamentary process. And now you would want an extra parliamentary process to get in. That doesn't seem possible. And so then this idea that India is actually micromanaging affairs in Nepal, which in my view does great disservice to the entire run of history that seeks to make Nepal an independent country. Is it then true that in the year 2009 and 10, one party with great command of propaganda can change the political terrain, at least as I understand it, that Nepal, the Nepali political process can be influenced by India. But as I see it, the formation of the Madhavpur Nepal government and the fall of the Madhavpur Nepal government is entirely within the ken of the Nepali polity, Nepali parliamentary process. And yet to raise this big hangama about how it is not the Nepali process goes back to a run of adventurism that the Maoists conducted even during the time in government. The Pashupatinath episode and the fact that Lal Krishna Advani having to call Mr. Dahal personally to get the Maoists to back off. These are issues that indicate that the Maoists have been, for their own internal purposes perhaps, playing around with a larger issue of Nepali sense of self. And therefore I would just suggest that there needs to be one more element of analysis. Why is Mr. Pushpakamal Dahal going around making insinuations, including about responsibility for the killing of Mr. Madan Bhandari and Virendra, making claims that are unproven as a former Prime Minister and a would-be Prime Minister, somebody who helped bring his party out of the cold into open politics, led it into the Prime Ministership. I believe that Nepali polity would want to see the Maoists convert the Raj Nepali polity. Why is this happening? In my view, and I'll end there, in my view it has to do with the fact that the divisions within the Maoists were becoming unmanageable, number one. The need to say different things to different people, have your feet in many boats, was also becoming unmanageable. And when the possibility of getting back into government also seemed an impossibility, Mr. Pushpakamal Dahal, in my layman's reading, decided that he would rather now concentrate on building his base within his party, not even building the base of his party within the Nepali polity. That could be a secondary factor that is also effective. Some people suggest that actually this is a very shrewd Maoist move because the Nepali polity generally can be sparked with anti-Indianism, ultra-nationalism in Nepal, which translates into anti-Indianism in most cases, that this is actually an attempt to create conditions for the elections up ahead. I personally think that, again, I could be wrong, as I've been many times before, but my own sense is that this is actually a panic reaction to a situation within his party where he felt there was a need to rouse the rabble, so to speak, with asking for forgiveness for using the term rabble, to consolidate his position, firstly within his party, and as a bonus, to try to gain some base among the larger populace, just the way that the Maoists did when they proposed the idea of ethnic federalism, hoping to gain a base, even going against Marxist thought, and promoting not class-based but ethnicity-based identity politics, by hoping to gain ethnicities on their side. Same formula might have worked on this side, but by and large, the fact that Pushpakamal Dahal, the chairman of the Maoists, has seen fit to call his deputy and the person primarily responsible in the Maoist party for the above ground movement of the Maoist party, Mr. Baburam Bhattrai, essentially has been called an Indian lackey by Pushpakamal Dahal. That seems to indicate, therefore, and perhaps justify my analysis, that it was the schism within the party where Pushpakamal Dahal felt there was a need to build its base by aligning with the so-called radicals within the party, vis-a-vis those who thought a more conciliatory line, a more practical line, a quote-unquote more democratic line, and this could be something quite out of the firmament of what actually the Maoists are doing, because they are as yet they are a party that is engaging in open society, doesn't understand yet fully that those who criticize you are not necessarily your enemy, that the long-term evolution of the Maoists probably works when there is criticism rather than appeasement. This is all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanak.